Hello there. Today I watched the movie Heart Eyes and now I want to tell you about it. It's a romance horror film about a serial killer who targets couples on Valentine's Day. It's directed by Josh Rubin and written by Philip Murphy, Christopher Landon, and Michael Kennedy. The film stars Mason Good, Olivia Holt, and Jordana Brewster. Okay, the story is fairly simple and does a good job of mixing the two genres. It follows Allie, a marketing executive who planned a horribly tone-deaf campaign. Allie's boss hires a new contractor called Jay to help her fix it. While the two are working late at a restaurant, they find themselves targeted by the Heart Eyes killer and end up running for their lives. The film has small sections of horror mixed into a romantic story about two people trying to survive a horrific event and falling in love in the process. There's a lot of dark comedy in the form of situational humor and visual gags, a lot of will they won't they energy, and a bunch of short but brutal kills. For positives, the story is well written and has enough excitement to keep your interest. The visual journey is cleanly executed and has a few standout moments in it. The leads also do a good job with their performances and the soundtrack is surprisingly effective. Starting with the story, it's simple, gets straight to the point, and doesn't waste any time. The romance sections are focused on the love story between Allie and Sam and do a good job of finding cute moments in a horrible situation. The horror sections lack subtlety and grace but make up for it with constant murder and a few fake-out twists. There's enough excitement and action that you won't be bored, and it comes in a few different varieties to help keep things interesting. Like the horror, the little bits of humor spread throughout the film are a bit on the nose, but there are a few chuckles to be had. The film doesn't take itself too seriously and does a good job of keeping things light despite the subject matter. The characters are also a little more respectable than your usual horror tropes. The two leads are actually decent survivors and don't make a ton of stupid mistakes. They're easy to root for in both the horror and romance sections. Next up is the cast. While the general cast isn't doing anything all that worthwhile, the two leads did a great job. Mason Good and Olivia Holt are tasked with playing out a love story between two strangers who just met. They play fairly normal people with a few flaws and a lot of nice traits. They have good chemistry together, both of them put on fantastic reactions to the horror elements, and they did the heroic turn quite well. Holt and Good get to display a variety of emotions, put on a few monologues, and do well with their action moments. Visually, the film is a standard horror journey with a few standout moments. It uses normal everyday locations and doesn't dress them up at all. We watch Allie and Jay go on a date and then flee as the Heart Eyes killer chases them down. During the chase, the Heart Eyes killer kills a bunch of random people who are just around in brutal ways, and sometimes we get a dark comedy moment from it. The kills are quick, usually have a tiny bit of gore, but don't have much impact. Then for standout moments, there's named character deaths and a couple of decent romantic conversations. The big deaths are usually a little more flashy than the random killings and are centered on screen. There's a Final Destination style killing early on that's exceptionally brutal and grotesque, and the climax has a couple of big gore moments. The effects are a little goofy but work well enough. For romance, they managed to capture neat little moments that really highlight the chemistry between Jay and Allie. Sound-wise, the film uses a huge range of instrumental tracks and a few original songs to back the story and introduce all kinds of emotion and flavor. For example, they used scored orchestrals for when the Heart Eyes killer is around, which gives him a Phantom of the Opera sound. The tracks aren't overly memorable, but they managed to do a lot of work in the moment. On the negative side of things, the performances outside of the leads are wooden and boring. The soundtrack isn't memorable, and there's nothing new happening here. Starting with the acting, the cast are called to play stereotypical horror and comedy tropes. They're one-note characters that are meant to be murdered horribly with a single big over-the-top reaction, or they're there to be laughed at. The worst of the bunch is the Heart Eyes killer. I can't get too deep into it without spoiling the story, but the actor who plays them is incredibly over the top. They can't stop foreshadowing the later parts of the story, and they do it in such a deadpan way that the twist sticks out like a sore thumb. Their partner in crime that joins them later is even worse, like two Jared Leto Jokers being unleashed on the world. As far as originality goes, Heart Eyes is just another generic slasher. The only real departure from the norm is the inclusion of the romance storyline. It does add a bit of odd flavoring to the film, but not enough to make it unique. Personally, I found this to be a decent watch. It's not winning any awards or blowing anyone's mind, but it accomplishes what it set out to do. If you're looking for a romance film with an unusual setting, this one works decently. If you like horror and romance, well then you might really enjoy this. I found it to be a bit mild, but decently well made. As for a rating, I'd give this film a 7 out of 10. Remember, these are just my thoughts on the film. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Bye-bye!